This is the non-tech podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am on Treaty Number 8 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering places of our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Well, hey everyone, happy Sunday. It is Sunday for us, and if I have my druthers, which I surely probably will, we're actually going to have this episode ready to go over to Dr. Doug for approval before the end of the day. So it might, depending on how we arrange things between now and, I don't know, the next 15 hours, we might even be getting this out to you on the same Sunday that's being recorded in an active stunt production, because why not? Because we can. Because we are the people and we have the independent media and the means to do so. Thinking about the broader cultural context within this show happens to operate. So, we're on Sunday here, the Lazy Sunday edition, we'll call it, of the non-tech show. With you as ever, Dr. Doug Reed. Myself, the somewhat less handsome but no less well-intentioned Dr. Matt Stranick. Thanks a lot for being here with us. And we actually had, folks, we're pulling back the curtain here a little bit. I'll tell you a bit of the, techno magic behind the show. Prior to, we actually had about 20-25 minutes of conversation beforehand. In the professional biz, we call this an icebreaker. Getting acquainted with the interview subject in advance. Not that we're doing an interview subject as such, but I do have a new interview series, not associated directly with this podcast, but nor is it mutually exclusive. And so from my end of things, Doug, you may have seen some of these videos that have been coming out with Jim Ruland,
Yes, I have.
Colin Brooks. We have some more coming out this very day, in fact. And so, shameless plug for what I've been up to. Doug, how's it going, man? Bit of a little longer wind up for the episode there than usual. I apologize, my dude. How are things?
No, that's okay. Our pre-recording chat fits in nicely with the topic that we came up with, which is personal case studies in EdTech. It's looking at the narratives and placing people in the actual story and in the actual society and culture that we're doing things. So it's not as dry, academic, cut and dried the way it used to be, or the way we normally do it. Because I love that. I love getting rid of all emotion, sticking to the facts and figures. And we don't live in a world that's going to allow that right now. Well, I don't think so. It's got to be addressed. So,
well, it's interesting, and thanks for that, Doug. I mean, I got to say, I think anybody who observes this show, for me, I'm involved in a number of, I guess, what you can call independent media enterprises, right? I came up with this show. We came up with this show. I was just like, I can't do this myself. I can't do a podcast about education myself. I just can't. It won't be interesting. Doug was the first person I thought of. He said, yeah. And so right around then, my instructional design kind of brain took over, and I got, well, if I'm going to do a podcast about education, be involved in one, set up a WordPress site, set up, a video structure, set up a, audio delivery system through a plugin, in to get it to all these different places. I'm going to do it for the one thing, right, which I'm passionate about, which rules my life, education. Honestly, 20 years in, I think I can say that. With my other passion, music and culture, but mostly music. 90% of what my brain is outside of my job and education is in fact music related. So, I just reach out to Dan. I go, Dan, let's do a musical conversation series. And he said, yeah. And so these two things have been kind of going, same amount of time, completely different in the interactions, but still based around a same techno structure, right? The same delivery system vis-a-vis YouTube, vis-a-vis WordPress, vis-a-vis Spotify and all the others. Two different endeavors. Well, now that's trifurcated. It's gone from bifurcated to trifurcated. And now there's actually an interview series kind of independent of those two things, wherein that is actually associated with my job because it's associated with a professional development deliverable, right? That was agreed to by my chair and my associate dean. And it's like a document that is directly relevant to my professional growth and development as part of my PD plan for the year to develop an interview series with writers on a website. So that's what I'm doing. It has to be done before the end of the academic year. And so I'm hosting it on my own website because I don't have a WordPress server associated with the college. But if they give me one, I'll just port it over because it's super easy to do with WordPress. Anyway, bro, it's all very interesting that we're talking about this stuff now because Doug takes a very different approach as an educator. Doug devotes his creative endeavors outside of the show in all kinds of different ways than what I do. And we take different approaches on social media. We've been talking about this. I completely am a social media extrovert. I've gone into that mode out of necessity and a bit out of a sense of experimentation within just literally using the algorithm and attendant infrastructure through social media. I'm like, well, what if we actually use this itself as an experiment, right? What if we take certain elements of the delivery of this and actually just sort of adjust to see what the algorithm does in response? Algorithmic loading is what I call that. I don't know if that's a real term or not, but it's what I've been referring to it as. And I'm just documenting it, man. I'm just documenting the results. And if anybody thinks anything of what I'm doing is controversial, then I don't mind shutting it down at a moment's notice. I'm happy to, in fact. It'll give me pleasure to disconnect from Facebook forever. I would enjoy that. Over to you. How you doing, man? Since we're talking about personal approaches to media narrative here, I think is part of the gist of the show, right? So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, my approach. I feel like I've been in positions in the past where I have fought the good fight. Mm-hmm. I'm the person that stands up and fights whatever power to try to make things better. And it has cost me.
I know.
It has definitely cost me.
Everybody does what they can in their own way.
Yeah.
And I'm simply putting it out here now. For me, right, my thing that I'm doing, it makes sense for me how I'm doing it, given the factors of my particular situation. Everything that Doug is doing in his particular way is equally valid. Because we are both grown-ups and we are friends and we are colleagues, and it actually takes a varied approach in all ways to make any kind of public discourse even work, right? Nothing I've said or done has driven Doug away from wanting to be publicly associated with me in a professional way that his colleagues are going to see, my colleagues are going to see. This goes up on Facebook. This goes up on LinkedIn, right? I have 3,500 people following me on LinkedIn. I've got 300 people following me on Facebook. I have 300 people following me on Instagram. I have 600 people on these little tiny meta offshoots, right? That even together are less than a very small fraction of what I actually have in a much huger, wider political, or not political, but professional network. And so again, right, when you scale out your messaging, you go, oh, well, those are some quasi-inflammatory comments you're making about some celebrity entity, like, okay, 300 people are seeing that. Potentially 10 times more are seeing whatever I'm putting on LinkedIn, which is this. I told my students, I teach business students, I teach about the communications aspect. We have a section in our course about using social media for work. And I just said, right, it's about staying ahead of the narrative. It's about staying ahead of a Google search. Because again, if you're looking for your next job, any responsible HR department is going to, before they even hire you, before they even screen you in, they're just going to put you in a Google search. And so if you have your own personal website, if you have your own personal video series, if everything you're doing is really originating from you on the open web, then okay, you got 3 or 4, things like, ostensibly behind the Facebook firewall. That's not indexed in a general Google search. You really have to go looking for that if you're just using a general search engine, or you have to be doing a really deep scrape of the social media apps themselves from within the social media apps. It's resource intensive. I've got a level 2 security clearance from my previous role, right? I've got a level 2 security clearance with the government of Canada. Well, level 1, and then, presumed level 2. They don't give you the level 1 unless you're presumed qualified for the level 2. And I was not direct law enforcement or anything close. So it was like level 1 cleared, presumptive level 2. And I haven't worked there in a year. So anyway, RCMP and government have found no fault with me in my movements, in my interactions. I don't owe the CRA any money. I don't, right? I'm good. I have nothing. I'm just this dopey little, professor libtard guy. At the end of the day, who misses his kids. Gosh, do I miss my kids. Gosh, you might even say I'm emotionally distraught if you want to go there, but I'm not. And my kids are awesome, but we could go there. Speaking of truth and untruth. Nietzsche. I've been reading a lot of Nietzsche, and I'm enjoying it. Doug, you got some good readings here. You want to start talking to the reference list, my friend?
Yeah, one last thing about social media presence.
Yeah.
I had a highlight happen since we recorded last. I have reached 1,000 videos on Instagram of my dogs walking.
Dope.
So my quiet little piece of the internet is the dogs walking wherever or running wherever. Or
see, you are bringing people a very calm personal moment. I go through the algorithmic, mumbo jumbo and kind of raw culture stuff on my Instagram feed, and then I see Doug's dog videos, and I'm like, this is my moment of what passes for a calmness here. This is something where, because I follow a whole shitload of cute animal feeds, and I follow like a whole shitload of Garfield feeds just to kind of level out the negativity of it from those algorithms, right? Mm-hmm. But then I see your thing, and I'm like, I can't say it's better than Garfield because nothing's better than Garfield, but it's equal. It's equal to a Garfield in the feed, and what's better in this instance is that it's authentic. It's like, it's a dude I know in a place that I recognize but haven't been, geographic features of certain parts of PEI, and it's fucking gorgeous, and it's fucking the weather, and it's a fucking dog, and what the Christing fuck can you not like about that? It's awesome, So I appreciate what you do, man.
Thanks. I take that as high praise.
100%, man.
Now, what was cool about our previous conversation and how we're starting is this topic about the narrative in ed tech got brought up from an interview that we did in June 6th, 2024.
Okay.
Right? It was conversation number 7, exploring digital pasts, the present and futures. And it was Dr. Tony Bates, who I kind of fanboyed on a little bit in the interview because I love his stuff.
Awesome guy. I point to people in our field. I know I'm an English teacher this year, but within EdTech and curriculum stuff, particularly e-learning, Tony Bates. I revisited that interview myself not that long ago, and it's just because he has an excellent blogging series, and that's what it is. He posted on LinkedIn. He posted his latest blog where he sort of reflects on his career. It's amazing stuff. I really like his personal. I think this is where you're going with this, Doug. Maybe.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, his personal series of blogs. Because I mean, the gentleman is now past 70 for sure, and he's still being sort of selectively engaged within contracts and consulting and the like. But I mean, again, to have his standpoint from such a high level and in so many ways to sort of have that huge amount of professional practice, and then hearing about how it affected his family or what he was kind of going through mentally and emotionally. It's really I don't want to say impactful because I hate that word, but it does give you something to think about, right? It's a very, sort of personal leading approach, which you can draw value from both professionally and personally.
Yeah. And because you had mentioned it, so I went and read it. And
okay.
The very first thing I read, I threw in the notes. It's like, note that these posts are not meant to be deeply researched historical accounts, but how I saw and encountered developments in my personal life.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so nice to get that example. Like I read one on SAIT. When I was at SAIT, right, I walked into this room and had this conversation.
Okay.
And here's what was going on at the time. And it's like, it was so refreshing to me to say that. It was like, oh, wow, that's
well, it's just, I mean, this is where like the 2-person part of this enterprise really becomes valuable, right? Because like I'm still what people in the education sector would consider early to mid-career. I'm turning 47, pretty soon, which means that, I mean, if you look at a teacher as being somebody who could be active really until they're 70, and still contribute something, I mean, I still got 25 years left if people will hire me and if I'm still interested. And so at this point, I just think reflective practice is important. And I guess, again, right, as somebody who tries to embody something of a critical standpoint, I do try and unpack my own privilege. And I do this in class, right, through my educational choices and practices. By doing, say, indigenization, in my classes, right? I'm trying to sort of step away from being a middle-class, middle-aged, CIS, overeducated, basic middle-aged male, white guy, privileged in all the friggin' ways that our society even does, and just say, hey, wait a minute, what if I just check all that and just kind of try and look at things as clearly as I can without that friggin' implicit cultural baggage? And I'm not saying I do a great job of it, but I am saying that it's something that since I really started doing it, my interior life and how I feel that I engage with people in my real life and, through social media too, I suppose, I feel like the level of authenticity has gone up. I feel like I'm more, authentically myself since I started making that kind of choices. And so, taking an anti-racist standpoint, taking like some of these critically valid and pedagogically sound and very well tested, but critically driven approaches, it does somewhat take people out of their comfort zones, takes me out of my comfort zone for sure. But at the same time, when has anything novel ever, been achieved without like, a certain amount of discomfort?
One thing I like about what Bates said is he's talking about we need a vision. And I know we had the previous chat, so you have a vision for what you're doing with social media. And he laid out the steps for a vision of what to do with e-learning.
Yep. It's true. I'm actually going to edit some of that out with Camtasia, that last tirade, bro. Just
okay.
Yeah, man. It's true. Okay. So with what he was doing, was he was working at SAIT at the time, and he was talking to the instructors to say, where do you see the future going with e-learning, right? What are the needs and concerns of the instructors? And it's like, imagine having a conversation with people about their own future and where they're headed and what they think is going to happen. And it was so nice, because these are all like those mission statement kind of comments that people make. It's like, oh yeah, we'll do this and we'll do that, we'll do that. And then after the first big project planning meeting, all that stuff gets ignored and they get to the business of being a business. So it was nice to see him come up with this again. Yeah, well, again, from somebody who he has spent a lot of time sort of occupying executive and high-level roles relative to his interest and his sort of passion as an educator, to see these kind of reflections come across is, I think, really insightful for those of us who are not as far along in our careers, or who may have spent time in other areas, right?
Yeah.
I'm certainly somebody who has, I don't know, like educational management. I've been guilty of, kind of kicking them around a bit on the show as sort of a rhetorical sort of thing. But he's actually somebody who embodies, to me, what leadership looks like, it's supposed to look like in our sector. To me. So.
Yeah. And I feel I don't kick around leadership. I kick around bosses. And again, I have a very distinct difference of what a leader is and what a boss is. So
leadership and bosses are different things. We've talked about that.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past. I would like to jump to the McLaughlin and Oliver article for 2000.
Fantastic.
And I'm biased because this is about designing learning environments for cultural inclusivity. And Ron Oliver was one of the people that I interviewed and studied in my PhD thesis.
Okay.
And he's just one of those amazing people. If you're in a room with him, right, every time he walks into a room, he makes the room better. He is just an amazing person, a hard worker, so smart, so kind. Just one of those people that your life is better if he's in it. He's one of those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And McLaughlin and Oliver, what they did is they said, when you're building, when you're doing design and when you're building these processes, culture matters. You have to include the cultural component to it. You can't just ignore it. And literally what's been happening for the last 3 to 5 months, right? It's like, yeah, we can't ignore it, even though I really want to. it just can't happen. And they're talking about instructional design. And this is when instructional design was much, much less mature than what it is now. And it was just really neat. So I put this little table in where they're talking about the ID paradigms. Is it inclusive? What's the perspective? Is it inverted? Is it culturally unidimensional? And it was just so neat the way they put it together. And they basically set up the case that says, we can't ignore the people. Not everybody's the same. We can't ignore it. We have to include that in our design processes. And I just love the way they phrased it. And I'm a sucker for a good table. So I like the way they presented it all.
Yeah. One of the things, I did my master's degree with a focus on instructional design. Course-based degree. I didn't break any new ground doing a thesis or anything. But I did enough of it to know, and I taught, I taught, of course, to graduate students online for a few years, an elective, Education 6228, Designing Instructional Materials for University of New Brunswick, an online course that I kind of had access to as the primary instructor for a good 3 or 4 years anyway. And one of the things I loved about teaching that class was like what you show in this table. The table being what it is. I mean, I know that as a thing that the person came up with, I'm like, well, I need an improvised way of representing this. And boy, oh boy, do the instructional designer people just love tables and like practical presentation of information, bullet points. Again, like I teaching technical writing, that was my gig for first 6 years of my career. Like make it concise, make it, reader friendly, make it just like throw out the jargon. All of that stuff is really present in the instructional design field within the educational endeavor. And so anytime we can sort of pay some tribute here to the instructional design field, ID, I, for one, dig ADDIE. I, for one, you want to start going down the path of like instructional design methodologies and approaches, since World War II, including funded through and developed with the U.S. military. I'll go there with you. I'm thrilled to bits. So I love the table, bro. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, man.
Me too.
Go.
So I wanted to bring that in because that is such a nice article.
It really looks that way.
And anything that's from the Australasian Journal of EdTech, AJET, I really like that.
They're tight. I came across them when I was doing my doctoral stuff. They're a legit, robust, well-respected, well-indexed. And again, I really appreciate your experience doing a lot of your EdTech kind of stuff in the Australian context, because it's one of those things like Southern Hemisphere, water goes down the drain in a different direction.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, it looks small continent, huge country is what it looks like. Like that vast interior, like no wonder these people are so effective at distance education, because just like the geographic dispersal between urban and non-urban areas, very similar to what we have in Canada in terms of the particular dynamic driving educational infrastructure and development within, a distance ed paradigm or whatnot. There's a reason why Canadians are noted for this stuff. There's a reason why Australians are noted for this stuff. And within the wider, British sort of Commonwealth sort of leading kind of countries, this is interesting. I don't know if you caught this. Anne-Marie Scott, who significantly spent time with at the Athabasca University, University of Edinburgh. She was a presence at Thompson Rivers. She was associated with the EdTech unit and the director of the EdTech unit as somebody who professionally, she was brought in, gave some seminars and the like while I was there. She's been appointed, if I'm not mistaken, just within the past week or two since the last time we recorded, as being the new head of the Commonwealth of Learning, the British Columbia based. Yeah, like Athabasca has some serious involvement with them. And it's sort of a pan sort of institutional and pan sector endeavor, if I'm characterizing that correct, with pretty strong involvement with UNESCO. I think I have those relationships kind of mapped in my mind correctly. Anyway, Anne-Marie Scott, who is of the EdTech kind of space and world, has moved into a pretty significant sector, directorship kind of role in this kind of specter. So again, talking about distance education vis-a-vis the British Commonwealth, I suppose. Commonwealth of Learning, I believe, is, associated with the British Commonwealth, hence, that terminology in the title.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to be corrected, right? But
yeah, I've been peripherally involved with them with some of the MOOCs, and
they've done some outstanding work.
Oh yeah.
The Commonwealth
they really have.
And so I know that the Australia, context is different, but nor is it mutually exclusive, right? I'm sort of thinking again with the wider kind of global endeavor of Commonwealth nations and approaches to distance ed, and how that sort of is shaped within a somewhat post-colonial context, right, with the British Empire and its holdings diminishing and in decline, and in terms of power, concentrated political power. That's not a controversial statement. Again, man, just what that means even for education delivery across that. And so, again, this is why Dr. Bates, Tony, started British Open University, right? Came over to Canada, spent the, I guess, later 2/3 of his career effectively in Canada with the UBC, and then with his other projects, subsequent and since and current. It's interesting, right? In times such as these, where we are as post-nation states in an online mediated space of practice. In times such as these, politically hot and uncomfortable. Trade wars, militarized threats of conflict against previously frenemy times. We're in frenemy times, friends. Anybody who's listening to this is our friend, and we love you. I love you. I don't know about Doug, but
Anyway, I'm going to jump to the next one, which is Weller 2018, 20 Years of Ed Tech. And
love Weller. Love that book. Yeah, man, that's dope.
Yeah, this one caused me some chagrin, and I was a little annoyed with it.
Do tell.
Because my narrative is, I used to go to a lot of education conferences and a lot of ed tech conferences specifically.
Okay.
And in 2017, I went to a post-secondary conference. And it wasn't just educators. It wasn't ed tech. It was post-secondary. It was people from all these different disciplines. And the number of, when you have that conference list and you go through, it's like, oh, I want to go to this one, and then I want to go to that one. And you're trying to map out, how do I go from room to room to building to get to wherever you're going. And I went to a couple that drove me nuts once I got there. And Weller has said it so much better than I would have said it.
Okay.
Because I got in there and there was one where it's like, oh, here's these fantastic new techniques for teaching a post-secondary. And it's like, great, you got to go. And it ended up being two business profs, and I'm not disparaging business profs. They were two business profs, and they were talking about stuff teachers have been doing for 30 years. But it had never made it into the post-secondary business teaching vernacular. And I was like, oh. And then I went to another one where it was like a nurse and an architecture person, and they had a similar title, and they were doing stuff that educators have been doing for 25 years. And so his comment, Weller's comment is, I'm sure I was not alone in emitting an occasional sigh when during the MOOC rush for 2012, so many new discoveries about online learning were reported, discoveries that were already tired concepts in the ed tech field. It's like, yeah, we've been there, we've done that, we've moved on. You people haven't caught up with the literature, so you think it's new. It's not. It just is.
That's awesome. And I appreciate that. And I respect everything you're saying. I think one thing that our area doesn't do awesomely well is communicate outside of our own sort of educational area. I think that one of the reasons I thought MOOCs were interesting circa 2012 was exactly because it was the public recognition of an educational phenomenon in a significant way through traditional and mainstream sort of media formats, and not just within the scope of educational journals or blogs by certain noted and elevated practitioners. It was actually something where somebody could read an op-ed article about an educational trend, and I don't think there's a diminishment there in calling it a trend, where suddenly people were attenuated to, oh, post-secondary education has something going on, that's hitting my Facebook feed, like in terms of like a contemporary cultural moment, having a public recognition of education and having a discussion about it in a public sort of, the New York Times and these kinds of, I think you got to give people credit for being overwhelmed. I think you got to get credit for being like hosed by, just the run of typical media nonsense, as well as just kind of trying to make it through their own day. And so if you can get something that actually reaches people within that wider media bandwidth, there's got to be something there that's of value.
Yes.
So, just that's my kind of thought on it. Sometimes popular stuff, it's like you can leverage that popularity and use it as a moment to bring something forward to people who haven't experienced it before. That's literally what educators do. But I mean, again, the MBA crowd sure has a way of just latching on to gizmos, new and just. I understand. I've been in the room with vendors before. I know how they roll.
This concept reminded me of when I was a K-12 teacher, and I was sitting in the staff room that first couple of days where we have all those meetings before the school year starts, and I've got like 5 years, 6 years experience, and then somebody new comes in with all these whiz bang ideas and let's try this and let's try that, and I'm literally holding myself back from saying we tried that more than once in the last 5 years, and we've got away from it because it doesn't work. But if you want to go, fill your boots, you give it a go and see what happens. And by the end of the year, I always made the point of going back to the new people to say, hey, how was that? Oh yeah, no, that was a disaster, and here's why. And it's like, yeah, okay, that ticks all my boxes. That's exactly what other people have experienced. But it was just the inexperience. And it's like, I'm not trying to dump on inexperience, but it's like after a while, I went to the wrong sessions is what I did. I went to the wrong sessions. I should have went to different sessions. So that's on me.
Well, and again, I don't mean to say you were like, putting shade on anybody or anything. I'm just sort of like, I'm actually one of these people, and this is probably a critique you can make of my career. I'm sure people have, that this guy just kind of goes for where the interest is and kind of customizes what he's doing to suit. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I definitely do. That is exactly what you do when you're trying to help people learn, rather than just kind of throwing down an arbitrary standard and saying, if you can't make it, there's something wrong with you. That is a model of education that I think we've all encountered in one way or another. When I make choices as a teacher, as an educator, it's like, what's the most human thing I can do in this situation? What's the most straightforward thing I can do in this situation? Those are my kind of two, what is the correct moral thing to do here, always. And then second to that, how do I minimize the paperwork? How do I minimize the delivery? How do I just make this as straightforward as possible? Honestly.
Yes.
So I respect instructional design interests. I respect viewpoints which align with that, which I think that book, 20 Years in Ed Tech, does a really good job of it. The personal reflection on these trends and tendencies. Again, personal vantage point on things which have tended to affect us in our field, right?
And part of what I like about the personal narrative and bringing the personal into the writing is this hit me because I could emotionally feel that. Yeah. So much of academic writing, there's no emotion. That's been scrubbed out. But as soon as I read emitted an occasional sigh, it was like, yep, I feel you. That is exactly how I felt. And it stuck with me in a different way because there was that emotional component to it. And so I just really, I enjoyed how Weller put all of this together. and told sent the message that Weller was sending.
Well, and what I appreciate here, Doug, with your selections thus far, particularly with the Weller, and particularly, with our Bates, is that it kind of puts a bit of a wider spin on context on what we're up to.
Yes.
Because what I've been told, at least by one or two people, that they enjoy about our enterprise here is that we couple the academic stuff with sort of the cultural moment a bit. And so even if you look at the notes, right, if you look at the WordPress site associated with this, you'll typically see the format, because I'm, my part of it is putting it in the WordPress, that we kind of have the parts of the notes that I contribute and the parts that Doug contributes, and that Doug, very fastidious, detail-oriented, on point with he's making this whole thing what makes it academically valid. And then that gives me the leverage, the space to write like a little, I don't know, mini reflection, right? Sort of a little personal 3 or 4 paragraph essay, because in terms of the production process, everything except my writing is done before I hit publish, right? It's just, I get all the stuff just so, and then I go, okay, what's left here? 3 or 4 paragraphs. 20 minutes go by, and then finally I can hit publish and send it over to Doug for review. So my thing on it isn't actually done, that little part that I do, until the very, very, very last thing before I send it over to Doug, so I can actually look at each episode holistically, and so that informs, the personal reflection. It's a bit like what actors do. What I understand of an actor's process, they're carrying the same body around, they keep the same personality traits, but they sort of put themselves into a space where, the mission kind of takes over while they're on point. And so that's how I view the writing part of this. I'm kind of speaking to some personal stuff, but it's underpinned with the professional stuff. Doug is speaking to the professional stuff more overtly, but it all comes from a very personal standpoint with him. So I think it's fair to say there's a bit of a yin and the yang here, right? I'm kind of doing the more extroverted, but with the academically stuff kind of subsumed a bit. You're doing the academically stuff, with the personal stuff subsumed a bit. You're getting both, right? And the package as a whole is stronger for that, I think. Absolutely. If I can extemporize on our format.
That's very fair.
Does that sound off base? I mean, I think I described it pretty accurately.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes, that's bang on. Yeah, well done.
Okay.
So before I jump to the next one, you mentioned the website, and it's analogue-trope.ca/podcast, just for people that are listening and haven't gone to the website. So you can go.
You may. Go ahead.
The next article that I'm bringing up might seem like it's come out of left field, but I'm currently reading this book, and it's awesome. It's by Jean Taillé, and it's The Northwest is Our Mother. And it's the story of Louis Riel's people, the Métis Nation, and it talks about the history of the Métis Nation and how it became a nation and all that, and what's happened since, which is horrific, but they're starting to make a comeback. And the author, Jean Taillé, is a direct descendant of the Riel family, and everything in the writing ties back to that. So the quote that I found was, "But government rarely acts on the basis of need, want, fact, or logic," which I thought was kind of typical of what we're going through right now. But she ties it in and says, sorry, I'm not trying to bait you, but she ties it into, here's where this meeting was. Here's where this meeting took place for the Riel resistance back 150 years ago. And the descendants came back to that same room and had conversations about things that were really important that I was at, right? So she ties it all together. She builds the narrative and the family and personal component into this amazing book. And I'm a little embarrassed because that book has been sitting in my house for about 5 or 6 years now, maybe 7 years. And I'm just reading it now. And I'm just kicking myself. It's like, wow,
Man,
this is
I may,
awesome.
If I may.
Yeah.
I first of all, as a confirmed lifelong English lit nerd and bibliophile since, I was a child, the unread library is huge. You buy books and you might not read it for years and years and years, but the point is you have it and then you can read it. The unread library is massive. And to me, like, you don't kick yourself for not reading it before. It's just like the book finds you when you're ready for it. That's all, man.
The Japanese have a term for it.
Okay.
It's TSUNDOKU, Sundoku, okay. And it's the phenomenon of acquiring reading materials but letting them pile up without reading them in a way to savor it. It's like what people do with wine. They put their wine in the basement and they savor the collection when it's time, when it finds you, when it's ready. So, yeah, I've been doing a bunch of that.
And that's fantastic as well. Any excuse to talk Louis Riel, any excuse to talk Red River Rebellion. As a history
resistance,
buff,
Red River Resistance.
Right. Resistance.
There's a difference when you talk to people, and I didn't know that.
And pardon me. See, this is me.
Oh, no. I wasn't trying to correct you.
There's an amazing graphic novel you want to read. It's called Riel. It's by Drawn and Quarterly Publications out of Canada. But you're aware of it. You've read the.
Yeah. It's awesome.
It's fantastic. It's brilliant. Again, talking about, well, what even is Canada now? I personally am glad that we have the opportunity to live in a country that gives us freedom to speak to this, where I can say, okay, students, in this 2-week class about contemporary and past Indigenous literatures that I'm going to throw into the curriculum, let's talk about some of these people. Let's talk about some of these stories. And I have a huge untapped Indigenous author reading list that students, I'm like, go find Indigenous authors in Canada, contemporary, do a little PowerPoint on it, tell me why it's cool. So I have, at the end of my semester, this whole package of unread contemporary Indigenous Canadian narrative that's been crowdsourced from the students that I'm going to put into a list, a reading list, a curated student-driven reading list, and I don't know, put it into a Google Doc or make it live on the internet somehow or something like this. And so this is where educators in any area, if you're interested, can, in fact, through just a slightly, tweaking your curricular approach just a bit, can come up with something that your students come up with that is actually part of your teaching delivery, meaningfully for the subsequent semester, the subsequent year. This is why curriculum and instructional design studies are the fucking bomb. Sorry, bro, but this is like what got me into this field in general. Just being able to think about this stuff and actually action it. So
yeah, people learn when they do. When the students learn, when the students do, they learn, and we get to be the mediator in the middle, right? All these buzzwords we haven't used in years, right? We get to help them. We're co-creating knowledge. We're co-creating learning based on what they're interested in. To me, it's just wonderful.
It's the ultimate act of putting your ego aside as a person and literally in that moment going, what's the most that can be done to help everybody here come up with something that they need, that's going to, be a unique representation in an academically and or professionally valid way of, because again, the learning artifact is just like, the iceberg. You just see the tiny tip of it at the top, and then everything that went into its construction, everything that led into, the paper or the digital artifact or whatever, that's what the learning is. And so everything you've said, Doug, everything that we advocate for there on the show, is all about that, really.
Yeah.
So
with this, The Northwest is Our Mother book,
yep.
It was shocking to me, and my narrative to it is I have a degree in history. I love history. I've been reading history my whole life.
I love that about you.
When I finished high school, the first thing, like, people are like, oh, what are you going to do? It's like, I'm going to go study history. And they're like, oh, you can't get a job. I don't care. I wasn't doing it for the job. I was doing it to expand my knowledge and to learn to think differently. And I finish a chapter, and this book is so great because I like short chapters.
Yeah.
Each chapter is a couple of pages, and I can put it away and think about it and come back. And it was like every time, it's like, why didn't I know this? It's like, thank goodness I'm a lifelong learner, or otherwise I never would have known this. Why have I made it to my 50s with a degree in history, in Canadian history, and I didn't know this stuff? This is nuts to me. And that's my narrative feel to this book. And I'm loving it. I'm only partway through, and it is one of the best books I have ever read. I suggest everybody pick that book up and read it.
Well, that is high praise indeed, friends, because, again, the inestimable Dr. Doug Reed does not make book suggestions lightly. No. So here we go.
Yes, I have been informed that I can be quite critical. So
I think that's generally a bent within the show. I think anybody who's spent more than a couple of minutes with this program, I have to say, Doug, that at almost 3 years completed of this, we do have like a whole lot of hours of content here. Like, if you were just to start going from the very start of this and just go, I'm going to read all the notes, I'm going to watch all the videos, like, it would take you like a week to get through it, unless you were doing it around the clock. That, to me, is an interesting proposition from a content standpoint. That, to me, is like, the more content that's out there, I mean, the more you can remix it, reconfigure it, spit it out as a book, spit it out as a monetized piece of content in some way. I'm really interested, sort of, now that we sort of have a critical amount of content here, being able to sort of push it into other formats. And so, again, man, I think everything that you've been speaking to with these readings is sort of about moving educational practice forward in sort of ways that are sort of mindful and leveraging, the contemporary affordances. And I think, again, we kind of got an opportunity here with the critical body of work, such as it is with the show, to maybe consider sort of how that may pertain for ourselves a bit.
Yeah, I would like that. I have a list of ideas that we can do. We can do that off screen. We don't need to do this.
Summer hiatus project, folks. It's going to be dope.
Absolutely.
So who else we got here, friend?
We have Kim Borowick and Wortham, A New Era in EdTech, Emerging Challenges and Opportunities. And that's a 2024 article, so that's just right now. And what I liked is they took 8 different teams of people to share insights from their research and innovative uses of EdTech. And what they wanted was not just, the typical, here's the abstract, here's the intro, here's the process, here's the findings. They want this to spark further conversation among researchers, educators, policymakers, and EdTech developers. Like, their goal was, and these were written and put together in a way to engage people in a different way, which I thought was innovative, because so many academic articles are, I'd rather watch paint dry, but I know I got to read them to find something good to talk about in the podcast, or something good I was like, oh, good, that supports my idea. I'm going to include that citation in my paper.
I am so grateful, Doug, that you have such a interest and willingness to find these excellent resources, that every time we do one of these shows, it's literally the skeleton that the rest of the show needs to stand up and exist. Without it, this show just becomes two middle-aged, overeducated dudes having fun conversations. But the aspect of this, which makes it unique from just your typical weak-ass podcast, no offense, but you know who you are, is that everything that Doug's doing with these references and significant amounts of research that go into every one of these sets of notes in the Google Doc that he sends me before these episodes, it's like, wow, all I got to do is just take this and turn it into something that kind of moves around on the internet. That's fun for me. The other part,
that's awesome. That works well. We have our different things that we're
our complementary areas.
Yeah.
Because again, everything you're doing is like, I do dig the journal searches. I do dig looking at them. But like, if you give me a choice, right, my area is going to be just kind of, getting it up, getting it digital, whatever. I've been that way since I was a child. I make no compunctions about it. And so the fact that you are doing this stuff to such a great level with these notes is just like, wow, it gives me the ability to just kind of be creative in the ways that I, tend to be most creative. So much appreciation and respect here, pal.
Oh, yeah, and back at you. There's stuff you do that doesn't have a lot of interest for me, so I'm super happy that you do it.
It's not what I'm saying that you're doing the stuff that I find boring. I'm not saying that. It's just
no.
You're doing the heavy lifting, in my mind.
Oh. You see, I still approach this as if I was a guest lecturer coming in to teach a class on that topic, whatever that topic happens to be. And I always want to make sure that there's literature. And that's part of the reason why every article I've ever included is free. You can get it free online. There's no anything else. Because there was a while there where I had a private company and I was running my company, but I didn't have access to the academic databases because I wasn't connected to an institution. And I just felt like my hands were tied because so much stuff was hidden behind database paywalls. And it's like, I'm not paying $57 to read that article. I'm not doing it.
It's not part of the culture anymore. Quite frankly. I mean, the millennial professorate is real. And if you're telling these people who are like 35 to 40 years old and, anybody, 25 to 40 basically is my definition of a professional millennial. And these are the people who, like, I told my students in one of my classes, they're like, okay, what you got to, and they're Gen Z, so I can talk about it. We're at the end of the term. And I'm like, okay, one of your jobs is to take one of the chapters from this book, do a summary, explain why it's meaningful, include some quotes from the chapter, include some images from Unsplash, put it together in a PowerPoint, right? Typical low intensity kind of summarize the chapter, say what you learned kind of exercise. But then some of the students were like, well, we don't have the book. I'm like, okay, but the book has been part of the curriculum. The book is like something that somebody who designed this course, that wasn't me, said you need to have, and it's been sitting there in the bookstore. I have a copy of the book. I left it with them. I'm like, okay, well, you need this to do the thing. I'll see you in a week. One of you, please bring my textbook back, right? My copy of the book. And so I feel you on the open access journal stuff, man. Very much so. So.
Yeah, it's just an important priority for me.
Totally.
The last reference I have, you might recognize the names. It's Stranick and Reed, Conversations About Education, Technology, and Culture, which is us.
So, I like that you do a proper citation for these. Folks, take note. If you're interested in appropriate use of these materials, Dr. Doug has given you a citation for your citation machine.
Yes. And one of the things the quote I pulled out of it, because there's two different links, two different ways to get to the website, so I included them both. But it was a bit of your writing. Join us as we delve into the subjects and more, sharing our perspectives and experiences along the way. So we've added our personal narratives, which has, anybody that has listened to these know we're going to add our personal narratives to this. So I just wanted to get that little bit of self-promotion in because we've been doing it.
We am what we am.
Yeah.
To paraphrase Popeye.
That's it. That is
Awesome.
it.
Well, cool beans indeed, gotta say. I like where we've been with this. There will be, in this case, a little bit of Camtasia trimming from earlier because I digressed even further beyond than where we typically will sometimes. And hence the affordances of the, what do you call it, TechSmith Camtasia. If you want to pay us for mentioning money, if you want to pay us for mentioning your product on this show, we'll do it. We'll do it. Speaking of vendors, Camtasia, we need a sponsorship. They're excellent products, and I've been using them for years. We got some images here, don't we, Doug?
We do. And these are less tied to the topic than normal because it was just where my brain was. So it's my digital clutter has kind of regurgitated itself into the notes.
Sure. Okay, so any of those stand out? I mean, any of them in particular?
There's two. The first and the last one. There's one where it's like old Greek guy in the Agora back in the day, and it's like, damn you, book, I have stuff to do.
The Agora. I love that you called it the Agora, and I love that you can probably refer to it as the Stoic Agora, and I love the fact that you can probably refer to it as like a porch, right? That's what the Agora was. It was like a porch where people gather for discourse.
And the building in the background in the picture, I've been there. I went to a conference in the Isle of Rhodes in Greece. So when I was in Athens, the building in the background is like, I know exactly where that is because I know the hill that's behind it. I know where that picture was, or that drawing was supposed to take place.
Dang.
Yeah, so I love that one. And it just, I'm getting sucked in. And the other picture is the cover of The Northwest is Our Mother.
Okay.
Because that book is just melting my brain right now in a really good way.
Well, that is fabulous. Again, we have Dr. Doug over there with this significant piece of rebellion, Canadian
Resistance.
And we got On Truth and Untruth here, which is kind of my current fixation with the Friedrich Nietzsche. And folks, I don't know if that if that doesn't scream pan-disciplinary or interdisciplinary or intellectual curiosity, then I don't know what any of us are doing here, quite frankly. So this is what you get when you get the likes of us. What else we got here? We got at least 3 other things here before we close her down, my friend.
Yeah, the word of the podcast is narrative because we mentioned that so many times, and that's what it was all about. Mm-hmm. Question of the podcast is, how can personal narratives of educators help inform how we move forward? I think that's vitally important, and I think that is something that is a gap in the literature. I think too much of the research happens by researchers that aren't in the middle of it.
If I may, your question of the podcast, and you're the keeper of the topics, I wouldn't mind a topic sometime on case study methodology, because because case study methodology in education is how, like, that was my doctoral methodology. And again, personal narratives, I'm sort of surprised I'm only thinking of it now, but that completely aligns with case study methodology in education. But educational methods as such aren't my bag lately. It's other stuff. So anywho, that's awesome, man. Your question of the podcast put me on a wavelength for something else we might do. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. And what do we got for the phrase, my friend?
Phrase of the podcast. This is different this time because normally it's something you've said or I've said, but I just pulled it out of the Weller article, and it's like, emitted an occasional sigh. And it just kind of how I felt. I just like it.
I can dig it. Bemused and or nonplussed is certainly an appropriate response the interesting geopolitical and other culturally kind of bound times that we're in various ways.
Yes. It really is.
It really, really is. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's awesome. I'm really impressed. I'm really pleased with how this whole has turned out. This whole episode, this whole conversation. It really is always a pleasure. We kind of had this whole 20-minute thing running up to the show, where we kind of spoke a lot of things outside of this episode, and yet which are directly informing them as well. So again, I think that's just kind of an interesting reflection on today's topic. I also think it's an interesting reflection on just kind of where we're at now, navigating the media spaces where personal narratives are such implicitly bound parts of what people are putting out there in these spaces. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting because, again, it's a completely new paradigm because the explicit representation of educational and artistic culture, it comes as a response to political culture, because political culture allocates resources and laws and the environments which education and culture must operate. And that paradigm has shifted significantly within the past few months from established norms. I think that's not a controversial thing to say. So it's a whole brand new, and we're doing the best we can here, folks. And it's a beautiful sunny day, at least in my part of Canada, here in Alberta. Where are you at, my friend? How's the weather?
We're on 7th winter right now. It's snowing.
Well,
we have flowers starting to pop up, but the snow has covered everything.
Snow, sunshine, and everything in between. It's, I guess, typical early April is what we're trying to say here, folks.
Yep.
Really appreciate you spending time with us. Thanks a lot for being here, and we will be sure to catch you next time.
Yes, indeed.
Take care, everybody.